Now, the focus of this is on women in particular, but is there a broader problem with diversity in the boardroom?
There absolutely is, and gender is an easy place to start because we know what the mix should be. You know, we're pretty clear that we're 50-50 men and women, so we know what to aim for. And the hope is that by pushing gender, and the gender pay gap reporting in the UK has really helped to bring gender to the fore, but that by getting more women on boards, you automatically start to open up to greater diversity in terms of social mobility, sexuality, race. And I mean, I heard very interesting, I was at a diversity conference in the UK last week, and Neil MacArthur, who is the CEO of the UK Gambling Commission, because KPMG have a initiative for the Gambling Commission called, for the gambling sector, called We All Want to Play, which is about diversity. And he talked about the fact that privilege is invisible to those who have it. And so this idea, and actually I hear this from a lot more men than you might expect, of sort of senior businessmen saying, I think we're a bit of an endangered species. And actually John Allen, the chairman of Tesco's, said this, and women threatened to boycott his stores. Because in an environment where McKinsey say it's going to take 100 years to get to parity in the boardroom and 217 years, according to the World Economic Forum, to close the gender pay gap, it's going to be a long time before men start to feel like an endangered species on boards. I mean, the research at the moment shows that a woman needs to be 3 times more educated than a man to get on a FTSE 100 board. And any man at the outset of his career currently is 4.5 times more likely to make it to board level than a woman with the same academic abilities. And that's just not fair.
Now, what impact does legislation have? I mean, we've seen the progression of the Equality Act here in the Isle of Man. I mean, is that the answer?
I worry about legislation and quotas because change that is forced is resisted and often resented more than change that is wanted and sought out. And so it's one of the reasons why I think targets are helpful. But more importantly, I think for us to be talking about these issues, I mean, publishing the kind of views and comments that were published this morning and to have the business minister say that they're pitiful and patronising is absolutely right. And those sorts of views need to be aired and challenged. And I think it's by challenging them and getting the men on those boards to stand back and think about, why do I have these views? What sort of bias are they based on? Is it really true that a woman can't handle the complex issues that happen in the modern boardroom? Or is that a laughably foolish thing to say? You know, I think we achieve change much more effectively by doing that. And certainly we, you know, at a lot of the conferences and panels that I've been on recently, we've talked about what are some of the really effective ways to achieve change, and particularly mentoring and formal mentoring schemes, both for young women and other young people coming into the workplace, but also reverse mentoring for senior men holding leadership roles, so that they then engage with someone, a woman who's at the outset of her career, and understand what it's like for her and get to walk in her shoes to some extent. And actually one of the reasons those schemes need to be formal is that it's often easier in practical terms for an older man in business, an older senior man, to engage with younger men in the workplace without anyone misunderstanding their motives than it is for them to engage with younger women. So by having formal schemes in place, you allow that mentoring to happen and make sure that it does happen.
That's an interesting point. I mean, in the current climate and sort of a crackdown on inappropriate behaviour, inappropriate language, isn't that going to make people more reticent to actually mix up the genders in the boardroom for fear of being accused of bullying or harassment?
That's the real danger, and it was one of the reasons why I was speaking at an AGM in London sort of November time last year, when all of the sort of things that happen in Westminster around, you know, you touched someone's knee 15 years ago and even if she didn't mind, it's going to come back to haunt you and you have to resign your job. And that really worries me, because I think that takes us right away from the causes and finding solutions to just looking at symptoms and belittling the real issues. So I really worry about making men frightened to engage with women. And it was interesting. I mean, Catalyst did a survey recently which asked men what was the thing that what was the factor that might most undermine their support for gender equality. And 74% of them said fear. Fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of being disapproved of by their male colleagues, and fear of just not getting it right. And that really worries me, because women are not going to be able to change this. The very nature of it is that the people in the positions of power with the most influence are the men on these boards. And if they don't want to change it, it's not going to change. So for me, getting men involved and collaborating and supporting women in making this change is the only way to do it. And it was interesting that Sir Philip Hampton, the leader of the Hampton-Alexander Review, talked today about leaders expressing warm words of support but actually doing very little to appoint women into top jobs, or quietly blocking progress, are really not much better than those that oppose progress. And I think that's true. We need men to be active and supportive.
And what about the argument that women are more focused on raising a family than necessarily, and won't be as committed to those kind of senior positions in the long term?
Yeah, I mean, we did some research at KPMG called Cracking the Code, which was intended to support the 30% Club, and we identified 10 myths about women. And that was one of those myths, the idea that that having a family might hold back a woman's career. I mean, the research showed, I think senior women described it as a pit stop in a Grand Prix, that actually the learning and the sheer energy that came with having children really benefited them when they came back to their career. There is still quite a lot that can be done to make it possible for women to come back to their careers, and some of our clients like Vodafone in the UK have done some great work around their returner schemes that have helped women once if they've taken long career breaks, 5 to 10 years, to actually come back into the workplace and be supported back into the workplace, and it's stood Vodafone in great stead. But I have to say, I mean, Murray Edwards, who were one of the women-only colleges at Cambridge, looked at this factor. They surveyed their entire living alumni, so a pretty impressive bunch of women, I suspect, and asked them what had been the biggest impediment to career success. And that's probably the answer they expected. But actually, balancing workplace and family came in at only about 20%. Nearly double that, at 39%, was workplace culture. And they mentioned factors like non-supportive and difficult colleagues and managers, bullying, feeling their work was undervalued, feeling that they had to overperform simply because they were female. And the research bears that out. It shows that women genuinely do experience a lot of problems with workplace culture, because most workplaces have evolved to respond well to socialised male behaviour. And unconscious bias has meant that women are less likely to be recruited into stereotypically male fields, like tech and engineering, less likely to be given high-profile assignments, to get into leadership roles, and much more likely to be negatively judged in performance reviews, to be sidelined into roles that aren't client-facing or aren't high-profile. And as a result, many of them just leave those organisations, set up businesses on their own, go to environments where they'll be appreciated and they will have a voice.